So this is really a pleasure to have you here in our podcast, Eric Powell. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your time. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So since it's the first time that you are in our podcast, I have to start with the beginning. And so could you just summarize your whole career in a minute or two? Who are you, Eric Powell?
I started trying to break into American comics in the mid 90s and wasn't very successful at it. I did a lot of fill-in issues and inking work, assisting work for other artists. But just as I was beginning to think I would never have a career in comics, I decided I'm going to do my own book, which was called The Goon. And it kind of took off and enabled me to have a career. So that's kind of, I've been doing other projects, but The Goon has been my main focus for the past 25 years or so.
But just before The Goon, because you wanted to have a career in comic books, would you,
Yes.
do you know why at the time you wanted to be a comic book artist?
Yeah, at an early age, I enjoyed comics. I was very much into, the typical superhero comics that were available there. And but when I got into my teens, I kind of got away from comics and wasn't really paying that much attention. But I was always had a notebook or a sketchbook on me, and I was doing a lot of drawing and writing kind of prose stories with it. So they were kind of like illustrated stories. And then a friend of mine reintroduced me to some more modern comics, some of the edgier stuff that was coming out at the time. And I immediately thought, well, comics is what I should be doing. I just fit everything that I, was trying to do at the time. So yeah, that's really the combination of visuals and the storytelling and just a really unique, format that's what drew me in.
And speaking of visuals, you've been known in the industry for having a wide variety of usage for pencil or charcoal or paintings. I think you're self-taught.
Yes.
In the comic style. Do you think that your style maybe was the reason why you have trouble pushing into the industry at a time where the 90s comics were formatted in a certain style?
I don't know if I actually feel like that helped me stay working because I was always experimenting with different things. So if, like I said, I was doing some inking work, so I would be asked to draw an issue of a comic, and then I could go over and take an inking job somewhere else. I think my style, not necessarily my techniques with the tools, wasn't necessarily the problem, but my style was definitely a problem because I drew more. I was more drawn to kind of the Bernie Wrights and kind of the 70s kind of ink work and stuff like that. And in the 90s and the American comic book market, it was called the West Coast style. And it started, mainly with Jim Lee, who was very good at it. But then a lot of people came along who were copying it, who were not good at it. And it really devolved comic art in the US for a while. But because I didn't draw in that style, I was seen as kind of old fashioned or something. So I wasn't seen as someone who would appeal to the current crowd of comic readers. Yeah, I think also I was doing a lot of stuff that wasn't suited to me. I was doing fill-in work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stuff like that. And it had monsters in it, which is great. I'm good at drawing monsters, but attractive people are hard for me. I'm much better at drawing, characters, people who are, gnarled and look like they've had a hard life.
Do you think guys like Mike Mignola maybe opened the door for artists who were into the monsters and the weirdness and maybe the experience with the art for guys like you?
Yeah, absolutely. If Mignola hadn't come along, I doubt the Goon would have had such a reaction when it was released. He definitely opened a door and exposed, a lot of people, not only to, that genre of kind of horror adventure comics, but also a different art styles, because he was so, like I said, the big thing in the 90s was this West Coast kind of Jim Lee style. And Mike is so far removed from that. He's very impressionistic, very, minimalistic. And yeah, for a long time, he was more respected among other comic artists than the readers. But that quickly changed, and now he's got the the full respect he deserves among the readership and the artists. So.
Can we go back to just, I think you already told this story for a certain number of medias, but to the creation of the Goon. Could you go back just to the basics? What drew you to that character, to that universe? How did you build that comic?
I really was just trying to come up with something that I would really like to draw, and things that I was good at drawing. I like, as I said, I'm better at drawing characters, and I always kind of liked the dynamic of the big main character and the small sidekick, the scale, of kind of like Asterix, but
except the big one is the leader,
right?
In this case.
And vice versa. So yeah, that was the main thing that got the ball rolling. And then I liked drawing. I really just took everything I liked to draw. Well, I like monsters. I like the kind of Depression era visuals of cars, and clothing and everything. And, kind of noir. So I lumped all of that together and then put my sense of humor into it. And that's, the Goon is what came out, for better or worse.
And was it hard at the time to just go to the publishers, different publishers, and say, would you publish that comic book?
Yes, it got rejected by everyone. I don't think there's a single I didn't pitch it to Marvel or DC, because that's not what they do. They don't take on creator-owned comics. But I think I pitched it to every other publisher in the US at the time, and it was rejected by all of them. So I ended up going with a small publisher that I worked with before for no money whatsoever, but they did a poor job printing it. So after 3 issues, I took it away and decided I'm just going to self-publish. And when it came out, Dark Horse took notice, because I had been doing fill-in work for them. They took notice that it was getting a little bit of attention, and saw that, the quality of the book, and they picked it up after, I think, 4 issues.
Yeah. Was it Avatar that picked it up first?
Yeah. Avatar. Yeah.
But so you're self-taught, and then you got self-published, and eventually you would take your freedom from Dark Horse to launch Albatross Funny Books. Mm-hmm. Do you see yourself as somehow an outsider from the industry?
I mean,
because you don't work for DC or Marvel anymore. You did once. I think there was an interview where you said like you wanted to do the Demon at DC, but you didn't see a world where that would be a possibility because they don't have a room for a guy like you.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. It's not something that I actively, reject doing stuff for Marvel and DC. I work with them from time to time, but it's usually like a cover or something. I did a run on Action Comics a while back, and a few one shots here and there for Marvel, but that's been it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I have a reputation that I could be difficult to work with because I tend to be pretty vocal in the Goon as far as the satire goes. But yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to working with them. It's just not mainly what I want to do because, you know, there are characters that I love. Like I mentioned, doing the demon, I think I could do a really good demon series, but what I would want to do doesn't necessarily fit with their concept of their, you know, the DC universe. And so I don't think they'll ever come knocking on my door to do that book.
Did you think drawing maybe Donald Trump's dick have something to do with that?
I'm sorry?
Do you think like drawing Donald Trump and in Satan's Sodomy Baby 2 had something to do with your current reputation?
I think it was established before that. I think my reputation of because I was pretty vocal about some of the things that go on in the U.S. comics market, where a lot of the shops will only focus on Marvel and DC superheroes. They don't look at any other work, so it's very hard to get your work out there. It's better now. I've been working in comics for about 30 years now, or close to 30 years, and I've seen the evolution. When I first started working in comics, you could barely scratch the surface or get beyond the superhero stuff of Marvel and DC. But now there's a much bigger variety of material being released and made and being accepted. So it's a pretty good place right now.
But you'd say it's a pretty good place, but it's also maybe more difficult to be noticed because there are so many more creator-owned comics now. So
true.
How do you keep it? Also because you've got your success with the Goon, but how do you keep it? I wouldn't say relevant, but in the light of the audience.
I don't know how successful I would be if I had to do it right now. Because of that, because there is so much material. I mean, when the Goon came out originally, it stood out because there wasn't a lot of material like it on the stands or different material. And now there's a glut, of a lot of interesting stuff, which is a kind of a great problem to have. You have a lot of choice, but I think I was lucky in that I established myself back then, and name recognition goes a long way if you can build a readership, and that will follow you from project to project. I think that's a really important thing to have to maintain longevity in this business.
Yeah, you also have a point of view as an editor, because Albatross wasn't only your books. Did you see like maybe going in the background, like I'm the guy who publishes now, your relationship to comic shops and aspiring artists who want to build a fan base? Do you feel like it's maybe your style, your genre of comics, the weird ones, have found an audience now?
Yes, I think they definitely have. It's
I'm really sorry.
no, but it is. It's I think there's definitely it's just a more accepting on all aspects, from the readers to the shop owners to the creators, feeling the freedom that we can do odder material and it'll be accepted.
Did you feel that getting an Eisner Award for the Goon changed the perception that the readership had? Did it gain more audience at that time, or does it change anything?
It's hard to say because I don't know what would have happened if it didn't. So it's hard to be able to judge that. It is nice to be able to put Eisner Award winner on there. I mean, it's great for the recognition, you know, especially because most of a cartoonist life is spent alone in a room, you know, just drawing, and, you know, you don't have a lot of, you know, exposure to what people are thinking, or if they appreciate the work, and having that recognition is really nice. Feels like you've accomplished something.
But it's funny because I think your art book / autobiography was a bit self-depreciating, yet you do have a successful career with a lot of awards. I mean, you got Ringo, you got Eisner's. Did you still think like you're not worth it, maybe?
Well, the art book, I take jabs at myself in the art book because there's something I felt anyway. I don't necessarily feel this is true, but as writing it myself, I felt there was something very egotistical about talking about yourself. So I was like, I'm going to take myself down a peg, so before someone else can, you know. So yeah, that's where a lot of the self-deprecation came from in the art book. But I think I'm weirdly the most confident, self-loathing person I know. Like, I'm like, I can do that. And then when I do it, I'm like, that sucks. That's terrible. So yeah, I think it's weird. I think you have to have confidence that you can accomplish something, or you know, that you can become an artist and do these things, but you also have to be, have a critical eye at your own work, and, you know, be able to say, that's not, you didn't do that right. That one doesn't work. Otherwise you don't improve. So.
Do you look back at your the Goon issues? And
I hate them so much.
I knew it.
It's like I just see everything I've done wrong or should have done better. So, but it is what it is. I mean, I look at other artists' work, and it's the same thing. You know, no one picked up a pencil and was perfect, you know, the minute they put something on paper.
Yeah, it's well known that most artists tend to look back at their first work and say, "Yeah, that's not so great."
Yeah,
maybe too many eye stabbings in the first the Goons. Speaking of things you absolutely did not fail to do, was the graphic novel Ed Gein. I think the English title is "Did You Hear What Ed Gein Done?" with Harold Chester. Can you explain and walk through what the meeting with Harold Chester was like, and how the project came to be?
Yeah. So I was a giant fan of Harold before we ever met, or ever thought about this book. I listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm working, because my days are so busy now that I hardly get a chance to read. So that's how I make up for the lack of time, is I listen to most books on audio. And I'm a true crime fan, and he was my favorite true crime author because he would very unexploitive, very to the point, no, you know, sensationalizing. And he wrote the definitive work on Ed Gein. I was actually driving through Wisconsin in the area where Gein lived on a book tour, and started thinking about this, how isolated it was. And it just kind of got the, you know, gears rolling, thinking about how that isolation may have contributed to his, you know, mental illness. So I started having the idea to do a book, but then realized like everything that I would put in the book would be taken from Harold's book. So I thought, you know, I for a minute, I had the idea and I was very gung ho about it, and then realized that and was like, well, there's no point because he's already done it better. But then I started thinking maybe, he wrote his book in the 80s, and I thought maybe he had come across some new information or something in that time since then, and thought I'll take a stab at it and see if I can actually get into touch with him. So I found out who his agent was and sent them an email and said, was wondering if Harold might want to collaborate on a graphic novel. I'm a cartoonist. It's kind of my resume, and thought I would never hear back. And to my surprise, like a day later, they contacted me and was like, Harold's a big fan. He loves comics. He actually wrote a book on comics. So we got on the phone and immediately hit it off and just started working on the book.
So does it mean that apart from the book, you didn't have to do other researches from other media, like articles from that time, videos or documentaries?
We did. We actually did a lot of research. It was of course we had his book to go on, but it was also we wanted to not just adapt his book. I wanted to, do something new. So it was like finding any little bit of information that wasn't in his book that we could, or expanding on parts of his book. So we dug through a lot of old material that he had, and then found some other newspaper material too. And also just connecting the dots between events, using, newspaper articles and things to pinpoint when events were taking place and things. There are a couple of little things in the book that I discovered that hadn't been put in any other work before. And then Harold had a whole new take on kind of what Gein was, what his mental breakdown actually was. So I feel like we contributed some new topics to the conversation.
Some new perspectives on who he was and how he came to be such a monster. And I had a question also about you didn't show a lot of the murders that Gein was accused of, and there's not so much graphic violence, and I guess it was also a choice not to show the more gruesome parts of Gein's act.
Yes, I wanted this to be very clinical and kind of an exploration of the case. And there are a lot of comics that have been done about Gein in the US, and they haven't been very good. They are on the more exploitive side of things, where it's about, more like making a bad slasher movie or something, and I wanted this to be more
grounded,
well-rounded, but more like an editorial examination, more like as I was saying, Harold's work, where it's very much, it's just a clinical examination of the events. And that's really what I wanted it to be.
But it's clinical and it's factual, but still you have to draw some pretty rough stuff, like the furniture or the pieces he takes from the victims. I don't know. Is it hard to go into this kind of details?
It's funny. I did. I think because this was nonfiction and I was doing so much research, and it took on more of a investigative thing in my mind than the horror didn't come through. It was more, I think the investigative work of putting the book together it was just like, get the facts straight, I worked on a book with co-writer Tim Weish called Big Man Plans, which is about, it's a very violent revenge story, very violent. Working on that actually depressed. I got into a funk working on that book because it was so dark and there wasn't any real,
It's a slasher.
Yeah.
It's a real slasher.
That bothered me worse than doing the Gein book. I think, because as I said, it was more, here are the facts, I didn't really get into, I didn't really get into Gein's head much, about, working on that book. It was more, it felt just like I was documenting more than getting into the character's frame of mind.
Yeah. Because unlike Big Man Plans, who is really, colorful and exaggerated.
Right.
This one has, in the palette, it's black and white mostly. It's really based on Earth. You can see the reaction of people, and you can feel the atmosphere of that period. I think it's still it's still like a horror story to me, because you have to realize this person was real. What he did actually happened. How did you compose the aesthetic style for the book?
Early on, I was discussing with Harold and just visualizing some of the artwork, and going through a lot of the crime scene photos and things like that. And because it was in the 50s, all the crime scene photos, all of the newspaper material, it was all in black and white. And I just couldn't, it just didn't seem right to do it in color. It just didn't seem to fit for whatever reason. So yeah, to me, there was no other choice. It had to be in black and white. And I think that contributes to the feeling of it being, a document, of the time. So, yeah, I couldn't have done it in color for sure.
The character Ed Gein has inspired many monsters in fiction, most notably Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Norman Bates. Do you, maybe it's just the atmosphere, or maybe Hitchcock did the same research, but I feel like there was a bit of Psycho, Norman Bates-ish relationship with the mom. Was that ever something that crossed your mind, like maybe some influences from cinema, horror cinema from the 50s?
I don't know. I can't say that any particular film or director or anything really inspired the visuals. There were a few things that I did that were kind of from, kind of noir horror films and things where I exaggerated perspective, and or impressionistic films where I there's an example of, I would make Gein's mother look like she's 50 feet tall, and he's tiny, just weird, and none of the angles, especially when it was Gein's point of view, I would purposely distort the perspective on the angles and things a little bit, so the rooms look a little weird. But I don't think there was any direct kind of like Hitchcockian thing in there that I was being influenced by.
And what was your work relationship with Harold? Did you co-write the script, or was it really just you drawing the scripts? Had he had done comic books scripts before?
So we kind of put together an outline, and then Harold kind of polished that up and sent it over. And his first, the outline that Harold sent was much more drama. And I felt, it was like kind of off the mark. And told him, it's like, one of the reasons I want to do this is because I like your work so much, and your work is the opposite of this. You know, it's you know, as I said, it's very
Straight
clinical,
to the point, yeah.
straight to the point. And it's like, we have to put this kind of, you know, the family relationships and everything, it needs to be in there, but it should be not so much of a, for lack of a better word, soap opera, kind of thing. So, I went back and rewrote his whole, treatment kind of to get my view of it, the way I saw the book, kind of laid out so he would see what I was talking about. And then we just kind of went back and forth and adjusted things from there. So it was, it was totally a collaborative effort. We both, you know, chipped in on all of it.
Yeah, and I didn't read Harold Chester's book. I'm sorry.
No, it's
but
fine.
the whole idea of how does a murder impact a society at a certain period, how the conversations around it tend to happen, and how do scientists or researchers like Harold keep on reflecting on maybe some of the inspirations of the killer. Is it in the book, or is it something that you came up together?
It's a great thing that Harold does. He always gives some perspective of the time period. Like one theme that he comes back to over and over again in his work is this fiction that, oh, things are so much worse today. Things are so bad, you know, like crime is out of control. And, you know, children are so much more violent today. And then he'll, you know, someone will say that, and then Harold will go back and go, here's 12 cases of children murdering other children in 1824, you know? So it's, violence has always been a part of our society, and we kind of, you know, fictionalize our past and make it better than it actually was. We tend to sugarcoat or have nostalgic views of the past as these great times where nothing bad ever happened. And of course, that's not the case. So yeah, the idea of showing Gein's impact on that very sanitized 1950s America, where, you know, in popular culture, on, you know, everything was everything's perfect. You know, here's the dad, the mom, and their two kids, and everyone's happy.
We won the war and the economy is booming.
Right. And, but that, of course, that wasn't the case. It was what everyone wanted to project, but, you know, Gein kind of ripped that away and kind of exposed, you know, that 1950s America wasn't so perfect.
And Harold did write other books about famous serial killers of the United States. So my question is quite simple. Are you going to work together for another true crime book?
We're working on another graphic novel right now, but which
Who's
is
the killer?
It has multiple serial killers in it, but I can't say much because our publisher hasn't announced it yet. But I think it's going to be a really interesting book. Yeah,
I had a geeky question. You took Ed Piscor to do a variant cover for Ed Gein Kickstarter campaign, I believe. Does that ring a bell? You know, Ed Piscor, the artist who made Red Room and Hip Hop Family Tree, he made an illustration of Ed Gein to accompany the project like 3 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know. This,
right.
Like
Okay.
our Kickstarter, it was just my art.
Right.
We didn't use anyone else's.
Therefore, my question. So
Okay.
I wanted to ask if you, because he's more known to be a graphic artist in terms of horror. He did Red Room, etc.
Yeah.
It's the guy who does the cartoonist kayfabe.
Right. I'm
YouTube channel.
familiar with his work. Yeah.
I wanted to know if his approach maybe was something that you drew upon, because he's really known now for serial killer comics.
Yeah. I didn't see his Gein. I'll have to look it up.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
But maybe it was a Gein for his own project and not maybe for your book.
Yeah.
And switching now to the present, so you're working on this other book that you can speak about in our podcast, which is a shame. But we heard recently that you brought back Albatross Funny Books to Dark Horse.
Yes.
So why did you do that?
Well, when I left Dark Horse, there were multiple reasons to leave, but it was just, it just felt like it was time to do so. I kind of had wrapped the Goon up there, and I wanted to try self-publishing again. I did the series called Hillbilly, and it did really well. So it kind of didn't make sense to start, giving other work to another publisher when it's like, I'm kind of already have my own company set up. Why don't I do that? So we did Albatross for about 6 years, I think, 6 or 7 years.
It's 2016, 15?
16, I think.
16,
yeah. And after a while, some of the reasons that I left Dark Horse, some of those were solved, some of those were taken care of, and I saw a positive movement at the company, and felt like they were really addressing a lot of issues that they had in the past. And I was tired because it's a lot of work to try to run a publishing company and do your own books. So it seemed like a no-brainer to go back. But I also didn't want to give up what I was doing. So I asked if, would they be interested in moving Albatross over there as an imprint and let me kind of continue to do the same thing. And they were very enthusiastic about it. So that's where we're at.
Do you feel like maybe now that you touched on the graphic novel format, apart from the project with Chester, because it's a reflection on the indie market right now, that maybe comic books from the indies made for single issues have less of a chance against the production of Marvel and DC. Do you think like maybe it's something you want to explore as an artist and an editor?
Definitely. I think as time goes on, and I'm not getting any younger, I think I'll be focusing more and more on graphic novels, doing just self-contained stories. I like the way that you can, there's not a limitation. There's not a page count that you're having to, with a regular comic series, you have 22 pages, and that's your material has to be contained within those 22 pages. You can make it a larger run, but you still have to have those breaks, those 22 page breaks. And with a graphic novel, it's like, you don't have any of those limitations. You can take up, I want 10 pages to set up how the atmosphere of this town is, and you can have that kind of space to do it. So I really enjoyed working on the Gein book, especially when it came to laying out the page design and the layout of the book mapping it and everything. So, and there's a lot of ideas outside of the Goon that I want to do. So I definitely think my future will be more and more in the graphic novel format rather than floppy comics.
And I guess in terms of deadlines, it's also easier to get. Like you don't have to do 22 pages in 1 month to be sure to get to the schedules.
You can take your time, and of course, if you take too much time, then you're still, you still have to make money. So you still have to support yourself. So you can take more time, but you also have to take into account that you might get one book out a year, one graphic novel out a year. So you can't be too slow about it.
So the obvious and the difficult question of the Goon, the motion picture.
Right.
Is that still a thing? Maybe someday.
We're still trying to get it made. We've run into the problem that a lot of films in the past have, which is you'll get it set up, everything looks good, you're ready to go. Then the executive either goes to another company or gets fired. And then the new executive that comes in doesn't want to do anything that the last guy had on his slate. So they wipe everything off so they can get their own projects in there. So that's happened to us a couple of times now. But Tim Miller, he is very adamant that we are at some point going to get this thing made. So we're still working on it. We haven't given up. So.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
No problem. Thank you.
It was really good to have you. Thank you.